time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnett Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here.
With Barnett Bain. Good moment. Good moment. It's a pleasure to see you.
Show is sponsored.
I don't see everybody, but I do see you this morning.
And our show is sponsored. We're getting used to our new sponsor. We've not been doing this.
Our show is sponsored.
Yeah, we're grateful that we have a new sponsor.
That is thrilling. Our show is made possible with support from Hierophant Publishing and Insight Events USA, who are producers of books and events for body, mind, and spirit. We are pleased to have you as new sponsors.
Awesome sponsors.
And we will get used to saying that. It's going to roll off my tongue like water off a Ducks USA event in no time at all.
Fantastic. It's good to be back. I've been out of this seat for a little while, so I don't want to say I'm rusty because it feels very at home. But there's been some great stuff recently. The Jack Purcell show. Wow, there's a piece of that. Folks, if you haven't listened to that show, I highly recommend checking it out. And there was a story that he told which really has stuck with me. I actually went back and listened to it again. So Jack tells the story of being in Colombia, and he recognizes that he has this thing about time, right? That a lunch is like, he ran through this whole menu of like a lunch is an hour and a half, and it's a business lunch, or a business dinner, it's 2 hours. And if it's just a business meeting, it's 45 minutes. And he has this whole sort of in his mind rules about how long things are supposed to take. He's with a friend, Enrique, in Colombia, and they go out to lunch with some friends, and the hour and a half goes by, and this thing is still in full swing. 5 hours later, they're still at lunch, and they were leaving to go someplace to get dessert. And this is still lunch, and of course, he's thinking it's dinner time. But he was saying that what was powerful about it first is the losing track of time and having this amazing connection. It had been 7 years since he had been there before, and the folks he was with not only remembered his name, and that was the first time they had met him, they remembered details about the former time that they were together, and they talked about it, and he marveled at it. And I may screw this up a little, so I invite you all to listen back to it. But he drew a kind of distinction about how the not being so linear, the 7 years ago and the now, wasn't something they were even measuring, that there was a fluidity in their presence, the quality of their presence and the quality of the connection, in part because they weren't caught up in the time thing. And again, I don't know if this is cultural with the Colombian culture, and that was sort of something he intimated at, maybe, but just the importance of that. And as I listened to it, I kind of found myself marveling, like, wow, I have lost track of time. And I know those kind of peak experience, sort of perfect moments that can occur when we lose track of our linear sort of, benchmarks that we hold.
We're so married to a very particular relationship with time that we, for example, if we start at Monday, we want to get to Friday, we feel we have to go through Wednesday. But that's not always the case. That is not written in stone anyway. And I think your story.
Not if you go to lunch and
you go to lunch with Jack. Exactly. If you so it's a very different relationship. We're creating time as we're in the moment. We're in a particular moment in time as we create time to exist. So that's a big idea, and it's an idea that I think we want to tease apart a little bit with our guest, who I'm pleased to say is Bryan Hubbard, who has been here before. He's an old friend of Cutting Edge Consciousness. Bryan's a publisher and a journalist. He's the editor of the very well-known, more so outside of the United States, but in the rest of the world, there's an international magazine, folks, called What Doctors Don't Tell You, which, as an aside, go online. I hardly recommend this one, which he produces with his wife, our friend and best-selling author, Lynn McTaggart. Drums. We need to have some of those sound effect things like.
No, we don't.
Okay.
Don't go there.
Like AM radio.
Yeah.
Like we need to do that. So, Bryan,
welcome to the show, Bryan.
Hi, Barnett. Hi, Freeman.
How are you?
Good to have you. Good to have me back.
It's good to have me.
No, I like it. I like it to reverse it. That you're having us over for like coffee or tea or something.
Exactly. It's good to have us all back.
It is good. it's just generally good to be anywhere, isn't it? Let's face it.
This idea of that we are creating time,
or that we're limiting ourselves with this whole time constriction,
or that we have our ideas about time, how we hold time, and perhaps even the creation of time itself, is something that we are generating out of our personal consciousness. Is something that I would like you to speak to.
Oh, okay. A big subject, that one.
Well, we have plenty. We have all the time or no time.
I'm not sure I've got time for this, but well, I mean, yeah.
Can I shorten it? I want to talk very specifically about time as an obstacle to intimacy. Because, I mean, when I'm keeping track of this story that Jack told, what touched me about it is I do that. Like, I limit my connections because I'm on the clock, right?
Yeah. Okay. But I think also, if you bring that in, don't we? I think the real challenge is the impediment of time in the sense of memory.
Yes.
And how we don't see correctly. We don't see the person in front of you, who you're talking about, intimacy or whatever, and we just see the memory more of that person than we see the actual person. And I think that's a real challenge, to keep it that fresh all the time.
Where we're living into concepts that we hold.
That's right. Projection.
We do.
We're living into history. We're living into the past. And it's quite a commitment to be present. And there are skills and talents that are required to recalibrate, to become aware that when we are functioning in a past version of a past self, you call it a past body, or in the present body.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we do. We in a way, we have to live through concepts because we just couldn't. We wouldn't have the energy to get through the day if we didn't. And it's a great form of shorthand, but it also puts you to sleep because you're not really seeing the thing anymore. You're seeing even the naming of the thing isn't the thing, but that's what we use. And we use we say a tree, but of course it's not really a tree. It's something really quite mysterious. But we use that as shorthand, which is great because human beings are fantastic conceptual mind. But it does mean we don't have a direct relationship with that thing when we do that.
So my sense is it's a layering. In other words, and I'm using language we've actually used on the show before, real and more real. You know, it's as if I'm holding something as real. Yeah. And then there's the sort of breakthrough. And I'm not totally sure how the breakthrough happens, you know, but something happens where it becomes more real. I have superficial, ways of sort of explaining this. Something like, a bias, like I have a bias about, black people, let's say, and then I get to know someone who happens to be black, and all of a sudden my bias is gone because I've connected with them on a deep level.
Exactly. Yeah, that is exactly what happens, and this is that's partly a concept as well. Because of the experience, we will create that concept about somebody, and some people would call that a prejudice, but when you break through that, and you can only break through that in the living moment when there's a direct experience. Otherwise, we don't do it that way. And so, as you say, and I think that the difference is there's a relative truth to what happens as opposed to, if you like, an absolute truth. And we can, as human beings, actually achieve both. But most of us live with relative truth. And what happened with Barnett, with my book, was it got renamed because I self-published it as Timelight, and it got renamed because Hay House picked it up, liked it, but hated the title. So I had to go back and look at it again, and I came up with a different title, which I called The Untrue Story of You. And it's, although these things happen to us and it's true, ultimately it's untrue. And it's what you were saying there, Freeman, it's the layering of truth. Which I think that's trying to sort of tease out.
So we have this experience that we take for granted, and we assume this. We assume as truth. The serial experience of time. Yeah. Snowballs run down hills. The past is the result. The present is the result of the past, etc. Yeah. And but you submit that this is that there are other ways to hold this, and there are other ways to experience life.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think we are very much molded by the past of semi-truths, if you like, myths, whatever you want to call them. But we also have this extraordinary capacity to step outside of time. And, you know, I don't know, there's a really interesting book from way back, I bet 1927, by a man called J.W. Dunne, D-U-N-N-E, where he did this whole, he called it an experiment in time, where he had hundreds and hundreds of people sleep and then wake up from the dream state, and he'd have them put a notepad by their bedside. And very, very slowly, they learned the skill of remembering their dreams. And what he found was a very common thread through all of this was that most people were predicting something from the future in their dreams. Now, how is that possible if time was indeed serial? And he's just said, well, it's focus. That, you know, he said it's a bit like us reading a book, which may have 400 pages, but, you know, we can only focus on one page at a time, and we go forward in that. But the reality is that page 400 is actually there. If we could step outside of serial time, we could actually witness that.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I have a wondering about that, because that actually bumps up against something that I've been playing with, where I see the construct, if you will, my belief structure, right?
Yeah.
As creating these sort of self-fulfilling prophecies, these ways in which, you know, I can see the future, because if I keep doing the same stuff, it's going to play out.
Keep on happening,
you know, look, I know the outcome. If I'm crunching every person or situation into the, you know, sort of four walls, if you will, of my belief structure, then that's pretty simple. What is more interesting to me is when I have the ability, and I do in moments, to kind of get off that track and then marvel at the unfolding. Yeah, so that's the piece I'm curious about. And I wonder if the dream state, maybe, I don't know this, is this dream state, does it hold that level of possibility? Or is the dream state, and again, I'm kind of thinking in time, by the way, which may not be helpful, but is the dream state capable of, you know, sort of jumping off the reservation?
Well, you know, there hasn't been a lot of research into this, but the idea that you could actually massage or work with the dream state to create, you know, a different future, for example. I mean, I think that's really a very fascinating idea, but I'm not aware that many people have tried to explore that, because we don't seem to have any control over it, and we don't seem to be able to manage that state. It sort of happens. But, I mean, it's fascinating whether we could elevate consciousness to the point where we would actually work with the dreams.
I'm aware of artists and musicians. I just recently heard a podcast about artists and musicians who compose in the dream state.
Sure.
They explore in the dream state.
Dreaming.
They set up certain kind of practices for themselves to invoke a degree of lucidity. They work on musical compositions. And then they do the engineering in the waking state. But I have another question that I want to bring to you, Bryan. So it seems to me that as we age, as we get older, that these earlier conditionings, these earlier memories, they seem to gain more and more mass and more gravity, and people become more and more of who they were. You become more and more of the way of how you are patterned, unless and until, and I'll let you complete that thought.
Well, I mean, it's just picking up that's interesting, Barnett, and I think it's picking up really on what Freeman said a bit earlier, that, you know, it's self-fulfilling in that sense. But I think what is happening is that the one, you know, real distinguishing feature of the untrue story and my philosophy is that there is no distinction between a certain sense of yourself and the past. And indeed, it is the other way around. The past is creating this sense of you. And there's a way out of that. But for many people, they make the mistake, as indeed therapists do, of distinguishing this you that is created by this past and the problem itself, you know, which comes from the past. And they think there's a difference, and that this thing, this you, is different from it and is better than it and can manipulate and change that thing For example, take a simple issue like you have anger issues, and you say, well, okay, there's me, and I really look down on these anger issues and wish I didn't have them, and I want to work on them, without realizing that this particular you who goes to the therapist or whatever for that help is no different from that. That is another voice of that very same energy print of which creates the anger. There is no difference. So therefore, if you don't see that, just to answer your question, Barnett, if you don't see that, it will carry on amplifying in the world. And I think that's what's actually happening. And it will keep iterating and reiterating if we don't see that. We don't see the energetic ball of the past itself finding expression in the present, which is what happened.
And it's interesting from my perspective, having had artistic outlets, that it's in the artistic outlet where I can kind of put down, if you will, my personality. Yeah. That there's an essential self, kind of emerges, right? I've often said about my own artistic endeavors that it's a discovery process. Barnett and I both said this. You were both discovering and being discovered by the process. Yeah. Right? So it's this way where almost outlets for putting down the personality. Yeah, and that the great art can be, and I'm sure yours is, it can be a process outside of space and time. Well, even when we talk about great art, that's something that happens by accident. Anytime I set out to create great art, it isn't so great. But every once in a while, I stumble upon something.
You can't consciously do that. No, that's right.
We're going to step out of time and space for a moment. We're going to hear from
Let's go to commercial.
From some commercials. We'll be right back with Bryan Hubbard.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
This is Barnett Bain. I'm here with Freeman Michaels and our guest, Bryan Hubbard. So, Bryan, I have been giving some thought to how you hold this notion of the present self largely being informed by these past experiences, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And it occurs to me that what I'm reading between the lines is that you are saying there is an underlying energetic that is expressed in these narratives, in these stories.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Sorry.
And so when we begin to move into the potential of ourselves, the life, the third self that you refer to, which is the potential self, that you are now addressing beyond the self that is beyond time-space. It includes, but is able to reach out beyond time-space, and therein we are no longer trafficking in story, but in frequency.
Right. And that's right. But in order to do that, I mean, if you can imagine the whole thing is lots of energy balls firing out stuff all the time. And the past is, unless it is addressed and you see it for what it is and see that, there is no distinction between you and this past, until you start seeing that, it will become ever louder over the years. And this will drown out the other voices, including the most wonderful voice you have, which is, I call the potential. It could be called consciousness. It could be called your soul, whatever, turns your lights on. But it is that thing which we all have, but which doesn't get expression very often in the world because it's not heard. Because we are just doomed to carry on living, what is that historian said? We're doomed to repeat history if we don't understand it. And that's very true on a personal level as well. And that's why the most beautiful voice we have, the true expression, the voice of spirit, of creativity, just doesn't get heard.
And it is it is disconcerting to us because there are many. I count myself in this, so I'll speak personally. I often feel that I have enough. I have enough of a relationship with where I have been that I can be more focused on the unknown of where I am going. Yeah. And yet the legacy of where I have been is anxiety around uncertainty and unknowing. So the price of moving more and more into the potential self, and that's unfortunate language, but I'll use it anyway. The price of it is to be less focused on on all of the dragging bits, all of the stories of pain and hardship and disappointment that keep us fearful of being uncertain, that keep us fearful of becoming what is essentially lucid livers.
Yeah, and I think that's, but you're conscious of that.
I am, yes.
You're aware of that, which is a pretty good place to be, because most people aren't even that. So, but the next stage then is to see it for what it is, and that it is not you who is anxious. There is an energy
of anxiety.
There's an energy of anxiety, exactly.
And there's a pattern of thinking.
Yes, there's a me that is that has a there is a me that I am not terribly familiar with, but there is a me that is calibrating to the energy of anxiety.
Sure.
And I'm going to add to this too. There's a system that gets triggered, at least from my perspective, where we've said this. I don't know who to attribute it to, but you're living in the feeling of your thinking. That the thinking,
that's good.
Yeah, there's a thought process. Something happens where a thought triggers, and there's a whole emotional thing, probably an emotional history, right? There's something that occurred that was dramatic, that was felt, because we've often said on this show too, it's in the body somewhere, it gets stored, and then a thought arises, sometimes seemingly out of the blue, and all of a sudden I'm off. I'm into a pattern of thinking and feeling, and then it feels very real. The good news, and both Barnett and I have shared this, both on the show and then we talk about it periodically, that those periods last, they're not as long, they're not as dramatic, and I'm not as apt to believe what I'm thinking, or follow that thread into a whole drama that might evolve out of it.
Right, because if you become more conscious of that process, it loses energy.
Totally.
And that's what's happening.
But it doesn't go away. I mean, I think this is one of the big things in our world, and being the sort of personal growth world, for lack of better terminology, that I think there's this big myth that you can make it go away. And I think the best we can do is integrate it and have it where it's less dominant in our day-to-day experience. Yeah. And more outlets for the other side, the artist side, whatever. Yeah. Playing it
but another way of saying it is you don't give it energy.
Right.
And or
you don't give it attention even. Like I'm not giving
that
or don't give it attention.
Or don't give it attention. But you certainly don't have this identity with it. That's the point. That's the real point. Because if you don't have the identity with it, then it loses energy anyway.
Having the identity with it, so that is very, very powerful language and an important distinction, because not to give it attention or energy reminds me of, there's that old saw about the drunk who says, "Do you see the pink elephants?" Imagine the pink elephants. Yeah. And then he says, "Well, now don't imagine the pink elephants."
Good luck with that one. Well, that's where the therapy actually becomes tricky business, because in tracking emotional history, which I think
it's developmental. There's a point at which
I know it's required. That's just part of that sense of my own emotional history is required. But then the initial story of I'm wrong gets replaced with someone else's wrong, or it gets convoluted in some way.
So what I'm examining here, and what I'm very interested in your response to, Bryan, is not the place of tracking back and threading emotional histories and things, but on the shoulders of that, the awareness that overthinking itself, ruminative thinking itself, strategic thinking itself, except when it is siloed into a particular functionality. I want to put my key in the door lock.
It's problem-solving thinking.
Exactly. Any other thinking that beyond the kind of thought that delivers data to a higher functioning self is a relationship with the past self.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, and the quality of the past self is a thinking, is largely a thinking function.
And it's a repeating. It's a tape loop.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a very I identified 3 levels of past, and it's not a case of saying bad or good here, but to me there were 3 levels of it. One was, and what was interesting, I don't know how I got this, it was an intuitive thing or whatever, or just pure observation, but it was actually proven in various psychological studies quite recently. But there were 3 layers of memory. One was what I call narrative, which is the basic story. My name is Barnett, and I live here, and I do this, and I was brought up a Christian, or whatever it was. Then there is the knowledge memories. So we remember how to do things like tie our shoelace or whatever it is we do. But then there is this enormous thing called what I call the psychological self. These are all the half-remembered, half-understood, traumas and experiences, which are essentially emotions. And then they get translated into thoughts later on by the brain. But those are the 3 levels of memory, which is, when you sort of look at people like dementia patients, Alzheimer's patients, you can often see this. It becomes in a stark contrast more, because then you see certain memories disappear. Some people forget their name, but they're vivid memories of the past, or they remember how to do something, or they forget how to do something, but they remember something. And it's almost like different types of memory, are played out or lost. And and I think that's quite an important and complex part of this.
So it's very, very clear that we are generating our own experience 100% out of our call it addiction or loyalty or something in between to those 3 silos of memory, primarily the third, and that at some point in the evolutionary development of what it is to be human, we can be aware enough that we can allow something mysterious to now not simply, we're no longer co-opting the mystery and siphoning it into our own small story, but we can allow something mysterious to lift us into some co-creative, some mysterious and wonderful newness.
Yeah, and the great thing is, you don't have to unthread every experience. All you have to do is understand the entire process that's taking place, and the identification with these memories, or rather, more exactly, how the past is creating the sense of I, which then identifies with that energy in a symbiosis. And if you understand that, and you only have to understand that once to understand the whole thing, it's what you were saying earlier, Freeman, about, these things still go on, but they sort of don't matter so much, and it is just that you disassociate, there is no identity with it. And when that happens and that loses its energy, then the possibility of something much more wonderful is can come through.
What if you get to play directly with the energy itself?
Well, the past.
Well, artistically, I think the trauma, it can be a source if we aren't.
Sure. No, I'm not even talking about the past. I'm not excavating. I'm wanting to move our discussion beyond the excavation of the past into the potential of what is emerging and unknown. Mm-hmm. What we know of that is beyond the stories, the underlying the stories of the past and of the present, there is an energetic experience. And that if we can develop a relationship with energy itself, it seems to me we are now moving in the direction of what is the potential self.
Right. But in order to do that, Barnett, you do still have to deal with your stuff.
Yes,
and I have a question about this too. I'm jumping in, but the transmuting of it.
I'm not talking about jumping a step or bypassing or doing any bypass. I'm saying that we are so comfortable with dealing with our stuff.
Yes, that becomes its own hook.
Yeah, even in this conversation, we're dealing with our stuff, but there is something that is entirely new that you are introducing here in the book. That is entirely a virgin material. And part and parcel with dealing with the stuff which is ongoing, I understand that, there is this new opportunity to become intimate with energy itself. And to be carried into something that is absolutely brand new. What it is to live a life of that is becoming more and more expressive of our potential. And not only our past, it's the ratios are different. The percentages begin to be different.
So can I interpret a little bit? So it's not just about navigating all the little trailing bits. It's bigger than that. Yes, it may include that.
It's where we're going, not where we've been.
Yeah. Got it. I'm clear.
And I am curious about what you can add and bring to our listeners now about how we can function in the where we are going.
Well, I think that once, it's always there. It depends where our focus or consciousness happens to be at any one time. And the trouble is that, for most of us, most of the time, the focus is on, the past, this idea of the self, which is an incorrect self, and isn't with this potential, as I call it. But I mean, that is always possible to bring that in at any time, and that could be done really just through being highly conscious, to want a better term, being highly intelligent through great stillness. I mean, the first point is stillness, and then the potential or the possibility then can come forth. But what is stillness? Well, stillness is a very profound state, which is lack of this sort of thinking, this discursive thinking, which comes from the past, and that state is only possible when you are intelligent to the processes that come through from the past. When you are conscious of that, when you're intelligent enough, the stillness is a natural thing. Because someone said to me recently about, well, what about meditation? How often do you meditate? I said, well, meditation isn't what you do; it's who you are. It's a state of being, and when you're in that state of being, then any possibility can open up, and that's how you can live with that potential, and but it is as I say, it's a place of enormous stillness.
Yeah, I want to track back, and I'm not trying to just be dogged in the way that I feel like there's an importance in tracking back to this, transmuting some of the, what I'm going to call trailing bits, right? Some of the places where I recognize I get triggered, and my ability to sort of, let those pull back my attention, not go riding the ride, but kind of see those pieces of my experience from a compassionate perspective. They actually become, there's some juice in them, at least creatively, right? I can write, there's a fire in the way I hold the pieces of my experience that in the past were challenging, that are in moments challenging, but more or less not that challenging. I'm okay with it. It was a rough childhood, and this happened, that happened. Okay, no big deal. It's part of my experience, and it comes up, it bubbles up, and I go, whoa! But there's juice in there. So I don't know. I'm just kind of weaving this in. There's a transmuting process where,
of course, there is.
Yeah, where some of that stuff actually becomes functional. Quite functional in the way that I show this.
I mean, of course there is, and that's why these things happen.
Yeah.
It's what I say, it's a bit like, you can only return to Eden, but you have to leave it, which we've done, and you only have to go back as a knowing being, because you've gone through this and you understand. It's no good being in Eden and not knowing it. So you have to have all this stuff, and that's a very vital part of being alive. As I say in the book, the only way to heaven is right through hell. And that's where we have to walk through.
I love this, because there's a piece of language that we've used in the past we call mature innocence, and this is very similar to the return to Eden, where it's not the innocence that was we see in a baby or a child that's precious, pure potential. It's having been through the grit and the stuff of life to return to a kind of innocence that we can kind of create anew. We can actually embrace in a way. Yeah, it's kind of what you're talking about.
So as you say, Bryan, we have the potential to return to the real you, the child that you were once, who could see
sort of the essential self
as it was, really is unfolding in the present moment, with the lights on of someone who is aware enough to understand that that is what is going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I say at one point that my entire book is an exposition of one sentence from Matthew, from the New Testament, which was, unless you be converted, which, you know, old speak for change, unless you change and become as little children, you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. We all know this, but what does it mean? And my entire book is an exposition of one sentence. And that's what that's about, you know. It's saying that unless you become like little children, well, what does that mean, first off? And then how do you do for you to enter the kingdom of heaven? And what is that? And the whole book is about that. And, you know, in the kingdom of heaven is this sudden realization that you are this supreme consciousness outside of time and space. And that's really, and by space I mean there is no disunity, there is no difference. You know, it's an impersonal self, because it isn't a personal thing. It's an impersonal self outside of time and space.
That doesn't need to be fixed, or, you know.
The book?
It's a beautiful, beautiful place. But, you know, that's what this book is trying to say.
The book is just beautiful. As I read the original as well, and the first version, which was called Time Light, and I had that, as I told you, on my bedside reading forever. The new version, with the expanded version of that book called The Untrue Story of You, How to Let Go of the Past That Creates You and Become Fully Alive in the Present, by our guest Bryan Hubbard. I encourage you to go to your booksellers or to Amazon, wherever you find books, and dive into The Untrue Story of You. It will be worth all of your time and energy.
And Bryan, when you find yourself in the States, specifically in Southern California, we'd love to have you in studio at some point.
No, it'd be fantastic, Freeman. I'd love to talk to you more. You're an exceptional coach as well, and I'd love to sort of kick around some ideas with you.
We'll do it.
Yeah, I'd love to. Love to.
Fantastic. So
Great.
Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon. I know it won't be next month, but it will be soon.
Be soon, in the summer.
Yes, indeed. Lots of love to Lynn as well.
Thank you. Thank you both so much.
Awesome.
Okay.
And for those of you listening, we invite you to stay tuned, because Barnett and I will be back after these messages to wrap things up here on Cutting Edge Consciousness.
Welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness, thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
And welcome back to Cutting Edge Consciousness. Freeman Michaels here with Barnett Bain. Just got done with Bryan Hubbard. Wow.
Yeah,
stuff.
Such a lot to mull over, such a lot to think about there.
The Untrue Story of You. Beautiful book. Beautiful guy.
What's the untrue story of you?
There's a lot of them. And every once in a while,
What's
they
the
feel
true story?
Very true. Yeah, the true story is, it's revealed in moments, you know. They're kind of, they're always kind of, I call them perfect moments, you know, where I'm not my personality, I'm not my past, and I feel, connected. They often happen in nature. They obviously often happen creatively, some kind of creative pursuit. And, you know, I don't know. Yeah. I had a moment in the family the other day. We were all kind of playing together, and it was really euphoric. And I was like, wow, this is what it's all about. You know, and even describing it, I don't want to do that in part because it trivializes the moment of just feeling so connected to my children and my wife and what we've created. And just perfect moments is the only thing I can say. And what I can say is I experience it in moments, right? There's these moments where all of the stuff kind of falls away.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that more and more of these moments become more frequent, and the qualities of those moments become more incorporated, more incarnated? They become more realized in my body and in my being.
Yeah, they're a gift, and when they occur, I'm grateful for them. In the past, when they occurred, it didn't mean I wasn't grateful for them. Yes, I agree that they happen more consistently, or at least maybe I'm aware of them more consistently. They could have happened a lot in the past, I don't know. But my recognition, like, oh, this is it, you know, and it's a feeling. You know, again, they can happen in very odd moments. They can happen when, you know, there's just some little crack in the sun comes out, you know, in the morning.
I think it's a crack in our structure. It's a crack in our. Bryan would say it's a crack in our past self that allows something beyond our concepts and our ideas of who we are and how things show up to come through. That is more real. It's a deeper, more real experience of those energies. More real. So these things allow us to become more of who we are. And I also think that everything is an act of creativity. We're so conditioned to think, well, if I can use my crayons well, or I can write a book or sing a song or make a circus, that those are the creative acts. And they are creative acts. They're particular artisanal acts.
Yeah.
But they're not any more or less an act of creativity than how we do the show together, how we make a sandwich, how we drive the car up.
Yeah.
I think that the creativity really loves labor. I've said that before. And that the more that we become aware of that, the more realized we become moment to moment. The more, it's just another word for enlightened, a more word for increased, enhanced, deeper, more aware sense of consciousness, of being of a personal aliveness. All these words start to blend into a single stew. They're a soup at some point.
Yeah. I think there are, obviously sort of arenas where there's more potential in nature for me is like it,
more potential to experience these things.
Yeah, the breakthrough happens. This show is an opportunity. I mean, I almost always have a kind of moment or several where I'm like, oh, this is great. I love doing this. So yeah, I mean, but my experience of wanting to control it or manipulate it so I'm can plan it is a mistake, at least in my experience. I mean, I get that there are practices that can kind of line us up for more and more kind of peak experiences, but the minute we try to control it, something's lost.
Say more.
No, just that again, the minute I try to formulate it, like, look, in our world, again, I'm not trying to bash
Are you specific, you're speaking to the minute you try to control, period?
Well, because or the minute that I play that I'm manipulating. It's like manipulating spiritual principles. It's like creating a formula. It's okay. It's a tool, and it can be helpful. But my sense is every person has to kind of find their own way. Right? That's where I kind of pull from all these different, I'm not a practitioner of any single, coaching or training paradigm that I've been through. I kind of pull from all of them. And that's my own sensibility. And it's moment to moment, that whoever I'm working with, or whether it's a group or an individual, is going to require something different.
So you're speaking about an avocation or a professional expression.
In this moment, but it could be anything. It's like how...
Because I think that is true about the full breadth and weave of life.
Yes.
Again, when I was talking about we have a tendency to want to slice and dice what it is to be alive. So peak experience shines through and it's grist for the mill. It becomes alchemized, and we can express it through creative acts, through writing and singing and dancing and all that. Yes, true. It's true.
Don't forget cooking.
All of that is true. And I think, and beautiful, the larger game is, can I express it in everything?
Yeah.
Does it have to just be, I can do it in my cooking or on my bowling game? Can it be in my life? The larger truth is I can draw from everything and feel my aliveness and channel it through into my vocation or my profession or my doctoring or my lawyering. Beautiful. And can I put it into every moment of being alive? Can I have the lights on? Yeah. Every moment of being alive and see my life as a creative act?
I don't know. I mean, I get it. I love what you're talking about.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. But I mean, I don't know.
Because it's percentages.
Yeah.
It's percentages. And moment to moment, we become more and more alive, and you can read it in people.
Yeah.
They have a light to it. There's a light that comes out. There's an aliveness that comes out. And it is, as you said, so I thought that's where you were beginning when you were saying, well, I am a mix. I draw from here, and I draw from there, and I draw from there. And all of those things become a magnificent spiritual cocktail that is, for which I am an expressive vehicle.
That's what I was saying.
Well, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
But I think that is the potential for all of us. And the degree to which I know that I look, well, I'm going to take this and I'm going to use it here, or I'm going to use it here, is my version of what Bryan is talking about. It is me threading back to a past self and looking to, well, how can I utilize something in the service of an idea I have about myself that comes from the past. It's not bad.
Yeah.
It's not bad, but it doesn't.
Out. At some point, it's less fulfilling.
It doesn't add up to. It doesn't add up to this joy that you're talking about. That is increasingly available in every moment of being alive.
It's beautiful. Yeah, that's the evolution. That's and what's interesting about it, I've had a few what I feel like are breakthrough moments for me. Frankly, using tools. Who was it who said it? Hang on a second.
You mean like saws? What are you talking about?
No, like tools.
Drills.
I've been playing with Ho'oponopono.
Yes.
It's been around for a very long time.
Yeah, Hawaiian.
But it's a response to my judgments. So look, one of the things I do that I don't like, is I judge a lot. Like I catch myself in judgment of mainly strangers, but whatever. And so in that moment, I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And thank you. Just running that in my head, I drop my judgment. And so dropping my judgment has been nice for me. And I walk around the planet sort of recognizing I'm doing it and dropping my judgments. And dropping my judgments is great. There's a big payoff for that. In the past, when I first started yoga and having the experience of sort of euphoria of my relationship with my body shifted, because that's the intention I brought to it. And it was such a beautiful portal for me to have a different relationship with my body. So look, there's been lots of moments where tools or particular disciplines or practices have opened something up. What I'm kind of working with is not getting so attached to that being the golden chalice. That it's okay, it's great. It can be the golden chalice in a moment, but the next moment it's like, oh, I did that for a while, and it's not as critical. But the touchstone, the ability to go, that breakthrough moment, and the breakthroughs cumulatively mean that I'm a more joyful, happy guy than I was 10 years ago.
The tools are amazing. I mean, the tools are like the handrails, the crutches, the supports that get us from. Yeah. I have a friend who always used to say to me that the steps to getting there are the qualities of being there. And I just love the wisdom. I love the wisdom in that.
And even the there. We'll know the there when we're there. We're not really pointing.
There is no there, but we do experience our life in a serial way.
I agree. And we experience these kind of perfect moments, and the sequence of those is a life. I think about this with raising children, and how much, with Josh or even with the younger ones, how kind of moments we blew it and whatever. But there's my prayer, my hope is that there's enough moments of real breakthrough, of real bond, of more realness, and that's what carries the day. And with Josh, I feel like there were, whatever mistakes we made, there was enough more realness that we have a deeper bond than just the role of parent and, child, as it were.
It's so easy as a parent. I'm always tempted to look at something and say, God, I didn't do that well enough, or I didn't do it. And, and there's truth to that. And it's also maybe even more true that we created enough of an environment for our kids to love themselves enough to be able to take care of themselves. It isn't really my job, except unless I go into agency to look after her for the rest of her life. But we gave her enough so that she is intact enough. She's not in an insane asylum, and she's not incapacitated. And with that, I think we've come to the end of our show here. We Thank you for listening. Thank you, Freeman, for being in the chair across from me again.
Good to be back in the seat.
It's great to be in the seat, and we will be back with you again next time. Thank you.